So, hello and welcome to this episode of Peace in the Time of a Pandemic, a summer video short series from the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies, part of the Keough School of Global Affairs at the University of Notre Dame. I'm Josefina Echavarria, Associate Professor of the Practice and Director of the Peace Accords Matrix Project. And I'm here today with two dear colleagues, Felipe Botero, and specialist in regional implementation, and Rebecca Gindele, specialist in gender topics. Thank you both very much for being with us here today.
Thank you, Josefina, for this invitation.
Hello.
Felipe and Rebecca work at the Kroc Institute's Barometer Initiative in Colombia, and they join us today to talk about how the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting the implementation of the 2016 Colombian Peace Agreement. The Kroc Institute has a very special role in Colombia. It follows the implementation of over 570 commitments of the peace agreement, signed in 2016 between the Colombian government and the former guerrillas FARC-EP. In real time, we offer information to civil society, signatory parties, different national and international agencies, and the global academic and policymaking community. We produce regular, comprehensive, and thematic reports on the implementation progress. Last month, we released our fourth comprehensive report on implementation called Towards Territorial Transformation. Rebecca, can you share with us some of your key messages of the report and how they relate to the current COVID-19 pandemic?
Thank you, Josefina. Yes, as you mentioned, one of the key messages in the title of our report was really about this critical moment of transformation and territorial transformation that the peace agreement is in at the moment. So we've moved from our short-term goals to medium, long-term goals, but we've also moved into regional territorial implementation. And I think at the moment, there's real challenges around continuing to decentralize this process within this, this moment of the COVID pandemic. We know we can't send experts from Bogota, and so we need to look at these positive practices around trusting communities, understanding this change in implementation that's focused on regional, and it's not just regional implementation, but implementation by the regions as well. The other key message that we talked about in the report was around meaningful participation and the active participation of civil society. This is really important as far as ensuring ownership of decision-making. It also leads to greater legitimacy of state institutions and builds confidence in the peace process. And I think at the moment with COVID, just questions around what meaningful participation looks like, specifically for ethnic communities, for communities in rural areas. We know that we need to look at, there are many different visions of peace, and we need to really deal with these concerns that ethnic communities have at the moment around their consultative processes and how these are going to continue within the COVID pandemic. The peace agreement is participative at its heart. That's what it is. And the third message that I think probably is relevant is about the fact that this is a comprehensive peace agreement. It deals with inequalities that we can see have been exacerbated by the COVID pandemic. So there are positive cascading effects that we highlight in the report that really reinforce implementation. And I think what will be important for this year is to generate these positive dynamics of change and structural transformation based on community practices and building on these positive effects.
Thank you, Rebecca. I wonder, Felipe, if you can highlight for us what is the specific effect that the COVID-19 is having on the implementation of the peace agreement?
Yes, there are different kind of effects. There's one is the response by the government and the implementation agencies. So at the beginning, they have to stop their activities in the territories because they couldn't travel there because, like Rebecca was saying, these are very vulnerable territories with lack of health service, lack of connectivity infrastructure, so they can actually spread the disease there. So they have been adapting how they work, using more technology, virtual meetings, also using cell phones and other technology This poses special challenges, like Rebecca was saying, especially on the field of participation, which is at the bottom of the peace accord. But you know, from the government agencies' perspective, they're adapting using technology, and also from the grassroots society organizations, they are also adapting to these times. They're using more technology or hybrid strategies to combine physical presence with virtual presence on participation processes. We just have this for the local development plans that have to be done by governors and mayors alike. So they're starting to adapt also. But also the armed groups in the territories, they have also been adapting their strategies to these times. So this is a real threat to implementation and to communities living in those areas, because they have, for one side, some of them have started like armed quarantines, armed lockdowns, threatening people that are moving around to kill them, to hurt them, and also trying to gain territorial control now that the government has like other priorities to attend the pandemic. So that's another trend that has been happening in the territories. Also, there's a danger of redirecting funds, right? For this is very important that we understand that attending the pandemic and implementing are not competing goals. They actually complement each other, right? But there's always this threat of using this fund to attend the urgent needs of the pandemic. So that has been like the main effects on implementation.
Yes, and precisely today we had in the news, you know, that how is this new extra effort of $4.6 million by the multi-donation fund for Colombia, and how there is going already since June, I guess they started giving out the money, how they have been investing with priorities in the PEDs, in those territorial plans in light of the pandemic. So we're very happy about those news. And at the same time, we're very much aware that there are a lot of tensions and different movements in different directions. Rebecca, you were precisely speaking before about this exacerbation of inequalities. We know this globally. How is that playing itself out in Colombia in light of the peace agreement?
Thanks, Josefina. Yeah, and I agree very much with what you and Luis Felipe were just saying. The peace agreement is ever more relevant, you know, in this moment. I think the implementation of the Accord and the response to the COVID-19 emergency complement each other in many areas. So both situations, both the Accord and also the COVID-19 response, address these structural vulnerabilities, or need to address these structural vulnerabilities that we've seen not only in Colombia but all over the world. The COVID-19 emergency has disproportionately affected poor people, affected Black people. We've seen a rise in violence against women here in Colombia. We've also seen for many women areas such as unpaid care work just multiplying. We've mentioned domestic violence, and insecurity as well in the regions is a real concern for women as far as recruitment of children. Again, we're seeing more signs. So I think for women, we've seen a disproportionate impact, but the Accord does contain commitments that could tackle that. You know, so for instance, there are commitments around for rural women to really expand the network of institutions to help with those the unpaid care responsibilities that women are facing. As the report mentioned, the Kroc report last month that mentioned that over 80% of the commitments are aimed at social and economic reform, which really tackle these inequalities and tackle the core, the core reasons or consequences of the conflict. So I think that the peace agreement responds to many of these inequalities, such as rural health care, drinking water, and also has this focus on a kind of, how can I say, a real analysis of the needs of territories and its populations, and looking at how to strengthen local capacities and putting women and ethnic communities at the centre of tackling poverty and investing in local transformation.
Yeah, thank you. I think that precisely that same temptation that Luis Felipe was talking about a little bit at the beginning, to say, okay, so we only rely on expert knowledge that is in the capital, and we do not even use the resources that are already available in the communities. And by resources, I mean the ways of knowing, the ways of dealing with conflict that are already present in communities that have gone through so many years of war. There is an incredible resilience there. And I wonder, Luis Felipe, if you can expand on those ideas about the messages that we find precisely coming from these territories in terms of peace building in the times of a pandemic.
Yes, I think, like you were saying, one of the main messages is to put the locals on the driver's seat of implementation. So far, there's like a temptation to re-centralize decision making, right? Because in a time of danger, you go to a place you already know. Before this, in the fourth report of the Kroc Institute and other documents, we were saying that there would be political will, right, to involve locals, involve organizations, majors, ex-combatant, ethnic communities, women, youth from these areas, to be more in the place of decision making. Right now, with the pandemic, that is not something of will, that is a necessity, because you cannot actually travel to those places from the capital. So you have to mix both things. It doesn't mean that you don't use the expertise that you have in Bogota or in the capital cities, but that you rely more on the activities done by locals with the accompaniment of those experts in central places. I think this would have positive cascading effects through different areas of implementation of the peace accord. And just like you were saying, like many of these communities, organizations, they have actually built peace and created many project things, programs, activities during war times. So that's actually something that the state and the international community can learn from in this difficult time, right? So how to have the locals leading implementation. That would be, I think, the biggest message for now.
Yeah, and I think that in a way it can be seen how these different dynamics are contributing also to to making us even more aware of the diversity of the territories in Colombia, and why that main concept of a territorial peace that was put forward in the agreements makes so much sense. Because the way that we conceive peace, the way that we do peace, the way that we keep the peace, that we make it, is so much more tied to our places, the languages, the ethnicities, our genders, and trying to take one that works in a particular context and export it, it just vanishes that capacity of bringing people together. So I think that COVID is in a way also showing us that through those vulnerabilities, we can also find a lot of strength in those local ways of knowing and dealing with conflict and violence. So thank you very much, Luis Felipe. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for sharing your interesting insights on what is happening today in Colombia during the COVID-19 pandemic, here in the Peace in the Time of a Pandemic short series at the Kroc Institute.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.